Welcome back to the Prince Green channel. Today we will look at the history of black jockeys in the Kentucky Derby and how racism stopped black jockeys from being great. The Kentucky Derby, often dubbed the most exciting 2 minutes in sports, has long been a prestigious and symbolic fixture in American horse racing. Since its inception in 1875, the Derby has embodied tradition, grandeur, and athletic excellence. However, a significant part of its early history, a story of dominance, resilience, and eventual marginalization, has often been neglected: the essential contributions of black jockeys. In the inaugural decades of the Derby, black riders were not just participants, they were champions. Yet, systemic racism, shifting economic power, and exclusionary practices eventually pushed these athletes out of the sport they helped build. Spare the next 8 minutes or so while I explores the rise, fall, and slow re-emergence of black jockeys at the Kentucky Derby, illuminating a story of triumph and tribulation deeply entwined with America's racial history. When the first Kentucky Derby was held at Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky, in 1875, 13 of the 15 jockeys were black. The winner of that first race was Oliver Lewis, a 19-year-old African-American riding the horse Aristides. Lewis's win was not a fluke. It was a reflection of a broader reality. Black jockeys dominated early American horse racing. During the post-Civil War era, many formerly enslaved individuals and their descendants found work in stables across the South. Horse racing was deeply embedded in the culture of the antebellum South, and enslaved men were often the grooms, trainers, and riders of prized thoroughbreds. After emancipation, many of these men continued in the industry, now as paid professionals. Their expertise, cultivated over generations, made them the go-to choice for owners and trainers. In the late 19th century, black jockeys held an impressive record at the Kentucky Derby. Of the first 28 derbies, black riders won 15. One of the most prominent figures during this golden era was Isaac Burns Murphy, often regarded as one of the greatest jockeys in American history. Born in 1861, Murphy won the Derby 3 times, in 1884, 1890, and 1891, and maintained a lifetime win rate of approximately 44%, an extraordinary achievement that remains unmatched. Other black jockeys like Erskine Henderson, Willie Sims, and James "Soup" Perkins were also prominent. Sims, notably, was the only African-American jockey to win all 3 of the races that would later become the Triple Crown: the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, and the Belmont Stakes. At the height of this era, black jockeys were considered elite athletes and earned substantial salaries. Their fame extended beyond racetracks. Some were national celebrities in their own right. Despite their early success, the turn of the century marked a turning point. Racial tensions in America intensified, and Jim Crow laws institutionalized segregation and discrimination in public life. Horse racing, like many other aspects of American society, became increasingly hostile to African Americans. White jockeys, agents, and trainers, feeling threatened by the prowess of black riders, began organizing to push them out. Black jockeys were routinely denied rides on competitive horses, sabotaged during races, and harassed both on and off the track. This concerted effort culminated in the near-total exclusion of black jockeys from the Kentucky Derby. The last black jockey to win the Kentucky Derby during this period was Jimmy Winkfield, who took first place in 1901 and 1902. Winkfield's back-to-back victories were remarkable not only for their athletic excellence but also because they came at a time when the doors were closing fast for black riders. After 1902, Winkfield struggled to find work in the United States. Facing rampant discrimination, he moved to Europe, where he continued a successful career in Russia and France. In many ways, Winkfield's exile marked the end of the black jockey's era in American racing. By 1921, no African American had ridden, in the Derby since 1921, and the role of black jockeys was all but erased from the popular memory of the sport. The 20th century was a period of invisibility for black jockeys in American horse racing. The same system that once allowed for their dominance had turned decisively against them. Jim Crow laws, racial segregation, and the centralization of the sport into wealthier, whiter ownership structures ensured that opportunities for black riders disappeared. While African Americans continued to contribute to the industry as grooms and stable hands, their visibility on race day vanished. The knowledge, skill, and traditions passed down through generations were lost or obscured. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, there were glimmers of hope. However, systemic barriers, economic, social, and institutional, remained entrenched. The horse racing industry did little to address its exclusionary practices, and the mythos of the Kentucky Derby as a whites-only sport endured. Notably, the historical contributions of black jockeys were not taught or celebrated. Icons like Isaac Murphy were largely forgotten, their stories unearthed only by dedicated historians and archivists decades later. It wasn't until 2000 that a black jockey, Marvin Bracey, made headlines as a hopeful Derby entrant, though he ultimately did not ride in the main event. The symbolic importance of this moment underscored the gap. Nearly 80 years had passed since the last African-American jockey had participated in the Kentucky Derby. In 2013, Kevin Krieger, a native of the U.S. Virgin Islands, became the first black jockey in over a decade to compete in the Derby, riding Golden Cents. While Krieger did not win, his presence reignited public conversation about the role of race in horse racing. He spoke openly about the pressures he faced and his desire to break barriers for future generations. The conversation around race in the sport began to evolve. Advocacy organizations and cultural institutions began highlighting the forgotten legacy of early black jockeys. In 2015, the Kentucky Derby Museum opened an exhibit titled African Americans in Thoroughbred Racing, which traced the story from slavery through segregation to the modern day. There is now a renewed commitment among some in the industry to promote diversity, though challenges remain. Young black riders often lack the financial resources and industry connections to access high-level racing. The cost of training, licensing, and horse acquisition acts as a significant barrier. Despite this, there has been an uptick in grassroots interest. Programs in urban areas, such as the Work to Ride program in Philadelphia, which uses horsemanship to teach life skills to underserved youth, aim to reintroduce African American youth to the equestrian world. As America increasingly reckons with its history of racial exclusion, the legacy of black jockeys at the Kentucky Derby has gained renewed interest. The story of Isaac Murphy, in particular, has been revisited. In 1996, the Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden opened in Lexington, Kentucky, as a tribute to his contributions. His life has been featured in multiple documentaries, books, and scholarly articles, positioning him as not just a sports hero, but a figure of cultural and historical significance. Similarly, Jimmy Winkfield's legacy was honored in 2004 when he was invited to the Kentucky Derby as a guest of honor, though he had passed away in 1974. Winkfield's descendants accepted the honor on his behalf, marking a symbolic recognition of the racism that had forced him into exile. In 2021, amid the Black Lives Matter movement, many sports institutions began reevaluating their histories. The Kentucky Derby, which had long projected an image of Southern gentility, began to reckon with the fact that its early icons were black men who had been erased from its narrative. The Derby's modern-day fanfare, with its mint juleps, elaborate hats, and celebrity attendees, now coexists with a deeper understanding of its roots. It is impossible to tell the true story of the Kentucky Derby without acknowledging the foundational role played by black jockeys. The history of black jockeys. At the Kentucky Derby is a story of brilliance and betrayal, of extraordinary talent nurtured and then systematically excluded. These men, Oliver Lewis, Isaac Murphy, Willie Sims, Jimmy Winkfield, and many others, were not footnotes in the Derby's history. They were its authors in its earliest and most formative years. Their erasure from the sport parallels the broader American experience of black excellence followed by exclusion. Yet, as their stories are rediscovered and honored, there is hope that future generations of black riders will reclaim their place not just in the Derby, but in the narrative of American sports. The road ahead remains steep. Structural barriers still prevent many black athletes from entering horse racing, and the sport must do more than issue symbolic gestures. It must build access, mentorship, and opportunity. But thanks to the pioneering legacy of the early black jockeys and the courage of modern riders like Kevin Krigger, the story is not over. Rather, it is being rewritten. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out for now.